Hello, everyone. My name is Sara. I'm here on behalf of the Garfield Park Conservatory. People are just starting to log in now, so we're going to give it a minute or two. I'll just keep rambling while people keep logging in. Thank you for joining us. This is Garfield Park Conservatory's second Wednesday lecture series. We do this every month on the second Wednesday at 6 o'clock. We cover all sorts of different topics. Today we have Analu Maria Lopez with us. Analu is an archivist, photographer, and a librarian over at the Newberry Library. They're a community gem here in Little Village, where we're both live streaming from. So it's really exciting to have Analu here. Thank you, Analu. And we're just going to get things rolling. I think we've got a good amount of people logged on, so I'm going to turn things over to Analu. Just some quick info about how things will go. This is a webinar style stream, so we can't see all of your beautiful faces, but you'll be able to see ours. Once Analu starts, I'm going to turn my video and audio off, but I'll be here with you all taking notes. If you do have questions, go ahead and drop those in the chat, and we'll leave some time at the end of Analu's lecture to get to some of those. We may not be able to get to every question, but we'll get to as many as we can. So without further ado, Analu Maria Lopez, thank you for being here.
Hi, everyone. I wish I could see everyone's face, but thank you, Sara, for that wonderful, gracious introduction. And also I wanted to thank not only Sara, but the Garfield Conservatory. They said they can't hear anything. The Garfield Conservatory for inviting me to speak today. I've always been a fan of the conservatory since I was a kid. I remember going with my aunts to go visit it. So this is really an honor. All right, I'm gonna start sharing my screen and just jump right in. Oh, I think you need a, no, there it is, got it. Hey, Sara, I think you need to give me permission to share screen.
Got it. Let me find you. And I'm going to make you a co-host here.
Okay.
And that should give you the ability. How's it looking?
Okay, perfect. All right. Okay, so I wanted to start off with a land acknowledgement first. So today I'm joining everyone from Chicago. Let us always remember that we are on Indigenous land. This region we now refer to as Chicago, along with the larger region, has always been home to Indigenous peoples, including the Council of Three Fires, the Potawatomi, Odawa, Ojibwe, and the Illinois Confederacy, the Peoria Kakassia Nations, the Miamia, the Weya, the Ho-Chunk, the Menominee, the Thakiwaki, the Meskwaki, and Kickapoo, and the Mascoutin, among many other Indigenous nations. Chicago is also home to one of the largest urban Indigenous communities in the United States, and this land remains an important place for Indigenous peoples. It is our responsibility to acknowledge this historical context and build reciprocal relationships with the tribal nations on whose lands we are situated. So first I'm going to start off speaking about the work I do at the Newberry in my position as the Indigenous Studies Librarian. Then I'm gonna go into speaking about a couple Indigenous plants from this region, and then really focus most of my talk on plants more closer to my homelands in Central Mexico. I will also be talking about their uses and mostly focusing on how they're prepared to eat. So my goal for today is to make everyone very hungry. I also want to preface that I'm not a botanist or trained in the Western way of knowing about plants. What I've learned is mostly through family and friends, and stretches many generations back. I grew up with plants in my yard, with all kinds of plants, knowing how to use them, what they're good for, and I continue to have a array of plants in my home today. Also, I'm not really going to go into specifics about their ceremonial uses, but I will provide further readings about plants and resources after this, and I'm going to email that over to Sara so she can share with everyone after the webinar. Okay, so when talking about the following plants, I think it's also really important to talk about indigenous food. Very important to talk about indigenous foods and the importance of food sovereignty. So indigenous food sovereignty is a specific approach to addressing the underlying issues impacting indigenous peoples and our ability to respond to our own needs for healthy, culturally adapted indigenous foods. Throughout communities here in the States, but also really across the Americas and including Latin America, indigenous food sovereignty describes a myriad of local efforts to transform and reclaim local food systems, from combating hunger, increasing access to healthy and traditional foods, enhancing community health, and creating food policies, to targeting food as a mechanism for entrepreneurship and economic development. The plants and trees I will be mentioning today are all indigenous to the Americas and have been part of our diet since way before contact. I also want to mention a little shout out that there are a lot of amazing groups and individuals in Chicago that are also that can also speak to indigenous food sovereignty and native plants. I would urge everyone to check out what Chi Nations Youth Council is doing, and two amazing native women, Janie Pichel and Fawn Pichel. Hey girls, if you're watching, but I urge you guys to really look up the work that they're doing. Okay, so currently, my professional work, I work at the Newberry Library in Chicago. For those unfamiliar with the Newberry, it's an independent research library focused on the humanities. It was founded in 1887 by a bequest from Walter Newberry, an early non-native white settler in 1830s Chicago. We have been in this building that you see to your right since 1893. The library is free and open to the public, not currently due to COVID. But it's not really a public library. It's funded by its endowment and donations, and we receive no government funding. The Newberry operates essentially like a large special collections library and archives. The collection is mostly focused on rare books, manuscripts, and other materials. We have approximately 1.5 million books, 15,000 linear feet of manuscripts, 500,000, so that's almost 500,000 maps within our collections. The scope of the collections really range from Middle Ages through the 20th century and are especially strong for the coverage of Europe and the Americas. We have a total of 11 core collections, all of which I've listed here. I work with just one collection, which is the American Indian and Indigenous Studies material. So part of my role as the Indigenous Studies librarian is to provide reference services related to this collection to readers. So this is a very, very vast collection, covers materials on or by Indigenous peoples across the Americas. So that is coast to coast, pole to pole, from the 15th century to present day. I basically help anyone that visits us or reaches out how to navigate this vast collection and connect them with resources for their research. Another role I have is to also process or really give order to our backlog of unprocessed archival materials. So this collection is named after the donor. His name was Edward E. Ayer. The strengths really, as I mentioned, also, it does have strengths within Latin America, and specifically during the colonial occupation of Spain within Mexico. So it was donated by Ayer in 1911, and Edward Ayer was one of the most prominent book and manuscript collectors of his time. He really focused, his real focus of acquiring material was the documentation of contact. So that point of contact between Indigenous people of the Americas and European colonizers and settlers. So it really did start the collecting from the 15th century that he was interested in on into his present day, which was the late 1920s, when he passed away in 1927. So as I mentioned in the beginning, I want to start with a couple plants native to our areas, more like trees and plants in our areas, out of respect for like the lands that we're on. Also, this is just a really brief few that that I'm going to touch base on, because there's obviously a lot more here that are native to these areas, but these are the ones I'm most familiar with and the ones that I actually eat. So I'm going to be talking about the sugar maple tree, which maple syrup comes from, and then wild rice. Okay, so the sugar maple or the Acer saccharum, and if any botanists or plant people are out there, you can correct my later my pronunciation on some of these scientific terms. The sugar maple is a species of flowering plant in the soapberry or lychee family. It is native to the hardwood forests of eastern Canada, so it really goes up to Nova Scotia through the southern Quebec, central and southern Ontario areas, all the way up to Manitoba, Lake of the Woods, and the northern parts of central and northern United States. So it really has a long stretch, and I kind of put like a rough area of where these are prominent in. And it goes further out into also Minnesota, eastward to Massachusetts. Sugar maple is probably best known for the primary source of maple syrup, and you can kind of tell also by their really colorful leaves that they have. So growing up, I remember seeing these, their seeds. And usually when we would see them, we'd walk down the boulevard, down the street, and we would grab them and put them over the staircase, and you would see them kind of flying around. So we usually, would call them helicopters or maple copters. So that's usually a big giveaway for, and I put the top right photo, that's what they look like. But when you kind of drop them from the top, they'll kind of spin around, and that's when you can really tell that's a giveaway for a sugar maple tree. I didn't know the technical term for this until I was way, way older. But the technical term for these like winged seeds is samara, which refers to the specialized fruit that is basically designed to travel long distances from the parent tree. Some ash and elm trees also produce samaras, although the maple samaras are the very best at flying. So this tree has several uses. The inner bark is used by the Mohegan people as a cough remedy, and the sap as a sweetening agent to make maple syrup. The Meskwaki would also use maple sugar instead of salt as seasoning and cooking. And I've even seen, or I've read about the Mi'kmaq would use the bark to make a sort of beverage out of it and for other medicinal purposes. There are a lot of health benefits to maple sugar. Unlike most other forms of sugar, maple sugar does have a significant quantity of certain nutrients. So these nutrients include quite a lot of minerals. So for example, just 1 ounce of maple sugar provides 2% of your daily calcium requirement and 2% of your iron requirement and 1% of your magnesium requirement. While all these are like really small fractions of the amounts that you need for every day, there's still a significant percentage for a relatively small serving of maple syrup. Calcium and magnesium are also important for bone health, and iron is essential, as we know, for transport of oxygen to the blood. Maple sugar also has trace amounts of other minerals, including zinc and potassium. It's also packed with a lot of antioxidants, and antioxidants basically help protect your body. The antioxidants in maple sugar include gallic acid and benzoic acid. It's also a large source of sucrose. So sucrose is like the main sugar within maple sugar and provides you basically with energy. I also have a couple of guides on how you can identify a maple tree or the different types of like leaves. And usually this will help you kind of see them. I'm always walking around and kind of looking to see where I find them. And I can share these later after the presentation. But At the Newberry, we do have quite a lot of documentation of plants, and just some of the earliest books that are documenting some of these processes as well. So maple trees have been well documented by Europeans who would first come across them. Here are some of the earliest known documentations on maple trees, and specifically the maple syrup being created. Native people made maple syrup long before the arrival of Europeans, and it has been well documented. One of the earliest documentations of maple syrup maple trees being tapped for the maple sap for the basically maple syrup production comes from a French Jesuit on your left-hand side by the name of Joseph Francois Lafitteau. This engraving is from 1724, and it depicts Native Americans collecting sap and cooking maple syrup in pots, tilling the soil into raised humps, and then sowing seeds. So this is from 1724. Another one on your right is a 19th century depiction of the maple tree tapping process by the Ojibwe, and it was written down in this manuscript by a gentleman by the name of Herman Haupt. And it was written over a period of 10 years, and it basically described the Ojibwe maple syrup making and sketched some of the tools. This is actually the second edition of an unpublished manuscript, so this was never published, and it was handwritten by Haupt. The first one was lost in a fire, and then he later painstakingly rewrote it and called it later like the Phoenix edition. He didn't have funds to publish it, so he offered it to Edward Ayer in 1903, and there we have some correspondence between Ayer and Haupt. And he was hoping that Ayer would help him publish it, but that never happened. So we do have it at the Newberry. A couple early, I'm sorry. Here we have a couple other depictions of maple trees and maple syrup harvesting. In this engraving titled Indian Sugar Camp, it was created by Seth Eastman in 1853. Eastman may have observed this scene in Nicollet Island in what's present-day Minneapolis, which was covered in maple trees and home to several what they called sugar camps. He depicts within this scene the hard work required to transform maple sap into sugar. You know, it shows stuff like chopping, pouring, hauling, stirring, and then some tasting. A detail at left shows kind of on your left hand of the screen, it shows the actual sap dripping into the container. This watercolor was probably was one of 35 works on paper that Eastman did, and the basis for a later illustration that went into a publication by Henry Rowe Schoolcraft's like massive encyclopedia of Native peoples in 1851. I'm going to kind of go through a couple other favorites. This one isn't part of the Newberry Library, but it's another favorite photograph that I've come across over the years that actually shows maple syrup being tapped in 1908. And then the Chi Nations Youth Council, they do, here in Chicago, they do tap maple trees. And in these images, they kind of show the processes during their gathering of the sap last year. These photographs were all taken by the youth, and they were super awesome about submitting. After I invited them to participate in the exhibition, I asked them if we can basically exhibit some of these photographs, and they were in the exhibit last year. Okay, so moving on, I'm going to talk about wild rice, or I put the scientific names Zizania aquatica, which I was unfamiliar with. I looked it up. Several Native American cultures, such as Ojibwe, consider wild rice to be a sacred component in their culture. The Ojibwe call this plant manumin, meaning harvesting berry. And then I think there's another loose translation, but I don't speak Ojibwe. For if anyone's out there that speaks some, maybe a couple of friends of mine are watching. There are a total of 4 species of grasses that come from this type of wild rice, and the grain that can be harvested from them. This grain was historically gathered and eaten in North America, and then also parts of China. But wild rice grains have a chewy like outer sheath with like an inner grain, basically. The plant mostly grows in shallow waters and small lakes and slow flowing streams. There are 3 species that are native to North America. And I have them listed here. So the first one is northern wild rice, which is an annual plant native to the Great Lakes region. And aquatic areas basically of like Canada and Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Idaho. And then we have the second one, the wild rice, the Zizania aquatica, the main one. Also an annual that grows in the St. Lawrence River. I'm sorry, I got those like confused. But they also grow in Florida, the Atlantic, the Gulf Coast of the United States. And then we have another one that I heard about a while back that's called the Texas wild rice. It's a perennial plant. It's also found in small areas along the San Marcos River in central Texas. So with wild rice, there's different ways of preparing it. You can use it in stews. Sometimes the grains are put with deer broth or another type of broth, or maple syrup. Well, with maple syrup, they can be stuffed into different, types of like birds or something like that, or even steaming it into sweets like puffed rice, which is down at the bottom left, or rice pudding, and then you sweeten it with like maple syrup. It's typically sold dried, like a dried whole grain, like you see like white rice sold. And on the top right is one that a friend of mine gifted to me. It's relatively high in protein, the amino acid, lysine, and dietary fiber, and then low in fat. So, sorry, it's not moving to the next slide, but anyway, the equivalent of 1 cup of wild rice provides 5% or more of the daily value of basically thiamine or riboflavin, iron, and potassium. There is a lot of early documentation of this too, and one of the ones that we do have at the Newberry is another illustration by that same person that I showed you that illustrated the maple sugar camps, Seth Eastman, and this is 2 Native women harvesting wild rice that he did in 1853. So I've never harvested wild rice, but I've heard some of my friends that have done it and do it, and they've always told me it's really hard work. It's basically done as it's shown here in canoes, and then you don't really hit the rice, but you tap it or graze it for it to fall off into the canoe. I was going to show you all a video, but I don't think we have time for that. So I'm going to skip over now into indigenous plants in central Mexico. I can share the slides later if you all want to see this, but you can also see the actual process of the harvesting of the wild rice on YouTube. Okay, so now I'm going to switch over and talk about a few plants native to Latin America, but specifically within central Mexico. The following plants and trees are all native plants from the Americas, and many of these, when they were first encountered by non-natives or Europeans, they had never really seen them before and documented them in some of the earliest books that we do have at the Newberry. So I'm going to be talking about the squash blossom, the cactus or the nopali or nopal, the prickly pear, and then a drink that we actually just made recently called nochoctli or colonche, and then cochinilla, and then mesquite. The only thing that you don't eat on this list is the cochinilla, but we'll get to that later. So with squash blossoms, they are edible. Specifically, these are the regional areas that they stretch from. They are basically a flower that comes from, produced by zucchini, spaghetti squash, and many other types of squash. Long before European contact, this had been a major food source for native peoples of the Americas. Squash was first domesticated, followed by maize, then beans, becoming part of what we call the Three Sisters agricultural system of planting. So squash blossoms are highly perishable and are rarely stocked in markets. So sometimes I'm like super excited when I actually do see them in markets, even though I'd love to harvest my own. I usually trust the ones that are at the market and buy them. But also friends gave me some tips on how I can get some here locally. You can see like the quite on the map, the regional stretch that this has. So I really love how plants don't recognize borders and they grow, you know, in Mexico and Latin America, even across into past the borders into the States. So there are many benefits, and these are actually some of the ones I saw at the supermarket, and I did buy some, and then a quesadilla that I made with the ones that I bought. So it's believed that the likely center of origin for this plant is southern Mexico, spreading south through what we know as Mesoamerica or into the South America, and then it goes basically up to the southwestern United States. So there's a lot of benefits to eating squash flowers. And for example, in 100 grams, raw squash supplies about 16 calories, but raw squash is also about 95% water and 3% carbs, 1% 1% protein, rich in vitamin C, and many other nutrients. And so some of the earliest documentations of squash and the flowers were created in the 16th and 17th century. On your right, on your left, you have an early book of hours that was commissioned by Anne of Brittany, the Queen of France. And it was possibly illuminated, it's an illuminated manuscript, and it was possibly made in Paris by Jean Bordichon in 1503 and 1508. Unfortunately, we do not have this one in our collection, but this one's actually held at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France. But we do have, I found out that we do have a facsimile in our collection, which is essentially a copy of this. And it has somewhere around like 300 pages, and it's illustrated with a careful, like really careful depictions of these like really beautiful plants and flowers and stuff. And the two on the left are the ones where you see like the squash flower actually there. So there's many culinary uses for it, which include, you know, you can basically stuff, batter, fry, make them into a soup. It's quite diverse, the stuff that you can do with it. The flowers do have a sort of like subtle flavor that kind of tastes like zucchini. And you can eat them raw, so you can eat them that way as well. It's used extensively in many indigenous cultures, also a lot in indigenous Mexican cuisine. So especially in central Mexico, you'll see it. Again, in soups, I usually eat it a lot, and I grew up eating it in quesadillas. So I add like garlic, onion, salt, something like that, or I'll just add like the flour with the cheese into my food. Okay, so the next plant I'm going to talk about is a nopali, or the nopal in Spanish, and in English, the cactus. This is probably one of my favorite plants. I think it's super beautiful, super diverse, and it's such a giving plant. It gives so much. It's like my favorite to eat as well. So from cactus, you can get so much out of it, right? So I listed some of the things I'm going to focus on. Together with maize and agave, cactus, prickly pear, and many other plants have been staple foods and been a staple food and cultural development with the Chichimeca indigenous peoples. The plant has 3 different edible sections. You basically have the pad of the nopal, or the cactus, which can be treated like a vegetable. And then you have the petals of the flower, which you can kind of add like in salads. And then you have the pear, or la tuna, which can be treated like a sort of fruit. So then from there, from the fruit, you can kind of make something that we call colonche. It's a fermented drink. Not a lot of literature's out on it. You can find it in Mexico a lot of times, or if you know someone here that makes it, sometimes some bars do make drinks with it, but I don't like mixing it and messing up the drink with the liquor. So the cactus, I'll go into a little bit about it, is a member of a plant family with more than I think it's like 1,700 and more known species. It has a wide range of shapes and types as pictured here. And it can live in habitats that are super, super arid and hot. So many do live in extremely dry environments. So some places like Chicago or something like that. I always have my cacti indoors. I never have them out. The cacti show many adaptations to conserve water. So almost all cacti are succulents, which means they have this like thickened, fleshy part adapted to store water. So unlike many other succulents, the stem is the only part of the cacti where the vital process takes place. So most species of the cacti have lost like their really true leaves, retaining only the spines that they're known for. So the spines are really like highly modified leaves. So they also, defend against herbivores. The spines help prevent water loss by reducing airflow close to the cactus, and they also provide shade. In the absence of leaves, those stems, the really large stems, carry out photosynthesis. So to me, I'm like, that's really a badass plant, all the stuff it does. So the regional distribution, cacti are native to the Americas, ranging from Patagonia into the south to parts of Western Canada in the north, except for like a kind which grows in also Africa and Sri Lanka. So there has been a lot of early documentation on cactus or cacti. One of the ones I like comes from an image from the Codex Osuna in 1565. So it shows that middle image where it says Mexico. It actually shows a prickly pear at the bottom used as a symbol for Tenochtitlan or present day Mexico City. And again, a lot of benefits to eating nopal or cactus, and they're antiviral, they protect nerve cells, they contain lots of antioxidants, they regulate blood sugar, treat enlarged prostate, reduce cholesterol, and I've heard that they eliminate hangovers. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is the nochtli, or the prickly pear fruit. So as I mentioned really early on, from the cactus comes a variety of different things, including this fruit that it's known as like the prickly fruit. The name tuna or fruit is also used for the fruit of this cactus, or in general, it's thought that this term comes from tuna. The term tuna is of like Taino origin, and it was adopted into Spanish somewhere around like the 1500s, which I find really, really interesting when we start talking about how our plants are assigned names. A large majority are given non-native terminologies, which I also find really interesting just as a librarian in general on these assigned like terminologies. Other names include sabra, nopal, or paddle, from the Nahuatl word nopali for the pads. The regional is basically the same as the one that I showed you before. And they're native to the Americas. There are different types of prickly pear. My personal favorite is the red one. So I have all of them listed here, Spanish on the left, and then I translated some of it on the right for you. But the first one is the xocontle. In Nahuatl, that word xocontle, broken down, the xocok means like sour, and the nochtli stands for tuna, or the prickly pear fruit. This is a dry seed. It's kind of a sour fruit. It has like an acidic but firm consistency. It's often used in like vegetable stews and stuff like that, or like in stews, like if you want to use it for that. Now my favorite is that second one, the red one, or sometimes it looks kind of purplish, the skin. Its name comes from the large amount of seeds that it contains. Then you get the white one and the yellow one. So the white one is probably like the most common one and people seem to like it the most, and it has the least seeds. I personally eat the seeds, so you can do that. Then the bottom one does have also small white seeds, and it's kind of like an orange pulp. Again, a lot of benefits to eating la tuna. So again, it's about 88% water, 0 carbs. It has less than also like um, about 25%, 24% of magnesium in it. So one thing I'm going to skip over to is the nochoctli, or the colonche, which is the prickly pear wine. So another very cool thing is this colonche, or nochocli, and in the Nahuatl language it translates to mean nochtli, which is the name for the tuna, and then the ochtli, which means fermented alcoholic drink. The Nahuatl people designated the term colonche, which is probably from Chichimeca, possibly derives from Chichimeca origin, and it means basically cactus wine. But I want to show you a couple videos of us actually processing ours. So this is actually cutting it up and skinning it. So this is the process of making the actual wine. So after you cut it, you let it ferment basically for a few days. So this is after I think it was a 4-day fermentation process. And this is us kind of straining it now, because you want to scoop off the pulp from the top, and then you're going to strain it again to remove any other excess pulp or anything else that stayed on the top. I also added the seeds on the top for mine, and they kind of float. So after that, you'll see on the top right, like what it looks like. It looks like this really beautiful, thick, almost blood color, like syrupy kind of mixture. And then what you do is the bottom is where we kind of put them in the containers, and you refrigerate it, and you enjoy it and drink it. And it holds about 2 weeks around there. So I'm going to share this with everyone later, but I don't think we have time to show this, the harvesting of the actual prickly pear, but I can share this afterwards, my slides. So in terms of fermented fruits, I wanted to talk, there's a wide range of fermented fruits that you can enjoy, not just like the fermentation of the tuna, but, there's a lot of good qualities or good reasons why you should enjoy like fermented fruits. I'm not like really telling everyone to go out and eat all fermented foods, but it couldn't hurt to add it to your diet. I also wanted to mention that colonche, it's been around basically since way before contact. It was used as like a small alcoholic drink during harvest celebrations in late summer, and then during the autumn season. Early documentation of colonche, there isn't too much out there, but there is some. So I did come across some Spanish articles that talk about it at length. And then I was really curious about if that term colonche or nochocli was part of any of the early dictionaries. So I did find it in a dictionary from 1555 that we have at the Newberry. Nopalitos is another great food. I'm going to kind of rush through these because I know we're running short on time. But these are basically, you can make them in salads, stews. You can also mix them in eggs, and that's really good. This is my aunt kind of cleaning the cactus. And my aunt's on the far right. So you're basically scraping it and cleaning it before you cut them and everything. So the last thing, I'm going to skip a couple of slides because I know I can talk long. I'm going to go into talking about the mesquite. So the mesquite tree and the seeds are actually something that are really close to home. That I'm really I love them, and they just remind me of my childhood because I remember seeing them around South Texas, which I have family down there. So when I visit, I see mesquite in all throughout South Texas, and this is actually a tree that my aunt planted that's in front of her house. Mesquite or mesquite, it comes from the Spanish mesquite, which also is a borrowed loan, what we call loan words from Nahuatl. So it actually is mesquite. That's what and it's basically a name for several plants of this type. There are different types. The main ones are these 3 or 4. So usually they look like little pods or like tamarindo or like these little like bean pods. And then you have like the curly ones that are at the bottom that are really interesting. But the ones that I'm used to seeing and actually trying are the ones on the top left, and they're kind of really sweet. So they're sweet in flavor. So you can also kind of chew on them as like a treat. And you can also make drinks out of them. You can also make them into like mesquite flour, which I see sometimes at the store. You can also make them into like a sort of porridge, and then you can probably maybe put maple syrup in it. So it's really, really a diverse plant as well. There's some early 19th century and probably earlier also documentation of the mesquite. And there's a lot of these books also that we have at the Newberry. So they are rich, high in protein and fiber, rich in iron. They have a lot of potassium and zinc. So they're actually really very, very good and healthy type of not only the sap, but also like the actual beans to eat. I've also recall reading somewhere that the actual sap that's pictured on the right, there's some documentation in the 16th century that it was also used as ink. Okay, so I think I've run out of time, but I am almost done with a guide that I'm gonna send over to Sara, and I'm gonna have her share a whole bunch of these resources with everyone that's watching. I also have my blog that I kind of really nerdedly update constantly, and I talk a lot in length about these types of foods and their uses and stuff like that. And then I also connect language a lot to it too.
Thank you, Ana Lu. That was the fastest 40 minutes I've ever experienced.
I know, and I skipped over one of them because I'm like, I'm running out of time.
Yeah, and definitely, if you want to pass on some of those videos that, like you said, that we didn't have time for, I can definitely share those. Thank you for sharing the video of your aunt cleaning the nopal. If anybody's ever done that, you know that it definitely takes some skill and practice. I really also appreciated you sharing on maple. I think there's been an increased interest in indigenous plants and medicine. I think that's one that we're all really familiar with and don't really always recognize it as a native plant or medicine. I have a friend who's a Ayurvedic medicine woman, and without giving too many of her secrets away, it's what she uses to sweeten her teas. I've adopted
a lot more healthier than like other sugars and stuff like that you use. Yeah, I have some maple sugar that I was gifted to, and I love it. So I love it for cooking and everything.
Yeah, definitely. I've definitely turned over to using maple as like a staple. Let's look at some of these questions.
Oh, it's a lot.
We got some compliments on our glasses. Oh. Thank you all. First question here, someone asked, what do you mean by indigenous food sovereignty? Can you expand a little on that?
Yeah. So what I mean is also like, for instance, like the pictures that I put, let's see if I can reshare. I'm gonna try resharing again. So the pictures that I included in the front are pictures of my friend back home in his town, in his village, and what they're working on is basically having their own basically space and um, their own land that they have control over, and they can start planting their own traditional foods, right? And that's something that's really needed. Like Shy Nations Youth Council, I mentioned them too, and they do a lot of work on this where they can plant, you know, and garden their own plants and traditional medicines. And that's something, sorry, I'm trying to get to it. That's something that's really important for Indigenous peoples, right? Because we have a lot of foods that we eat now too, right? That make us really sick, right? So what he's planning here, what he's constructing here is a larger project that's basically a fully autonomous, that's run by the community, for the community, without the government or anything else attached to it, that they have control over this harvesting and planting their own food, their own medicines, to help their community basically and have more control over that.
Thank you. We've got another question. Someone asked if you have to be a professional scholar to access the collection at the Newberry.
No, not at all. Not at all. Yeah. So I also will not, like right now we're not open. So we're all working from home. And a couple of days a week I go into on site to do work, but we are, if you check our social media, and I think 2 weeks we're going to start reopening. And it's through appointment only this time. Before COVID, you didn't have to make appointments. You could just drop by and you can see anything, any of the material that I mentioned, you can just drop by. All you have to do is register for a reader's card, which is it's free, simple to do, and you can just come on in. So I encourage anyone, you know, that those appointments are open to anyone interested. So just keep a lookout on our social media. We'll be making like announcements for when that does happen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Another question. Do you know what the status of wild rice is environmentally? Is it a threatened species or on any sort of restoration lists or efforts right now?
So some friends that I know can probably speak at length about this, but some stuff that I read recently was that a large population of like wild rice and a lot of our foods basically are at risk because they're being what's the term I'm looking for? They're being I can't think, the name escapes me, the terminology, but they're basically being GMOs being put into them. They're being run by these corporations, so they're losing a lot of that flavor that you know. I'm sure like you can see like when you go to the markets and stuff like that, you'll see like certain fruits or vegetables that aren't seasonally supposed to be in season. And here I always ask myself like, oh, that's weird. Why is that here? That's not seasonal, you know. And that really goes back to thinking of how our foods are being made. And how are they being, what's being put in them really, right? So for wild rice, I can get back to you on that. If the person wants to get in touch with me, I can find out more about that for them.
Cool. We've got another question about the nopal, and specifically a cactus, a nopal that's native to this area. I believe Christina listed as Opuntia humifusa. And I do know that we have some native nopal cactuses in this area. I actually remember seeing some in some of the northern beaches here in Chicago. So yeah, I think it's native to the Great Lakes and other places up here north, including Minnesota.
Yeah, I think I left that out too, but I saw there are some in the Midwest region, what we call the Midwest, that do grow like in northern Illinois and stuff like that, which is something that I recently found out, which I'm like, that's cool. It's like a really interesting plant that it grows everywhere, really, in the Americas.
Yeah, I'm wondering through research if there might be any documentation of that being used in history. So yeah,
I can look into that. Yeah,
that would be cool. I know that it's definitely it's not super common anymore. So it's one of those species that is definitely going extinct in this area. Someone asked where you've got your squash blossoms.
Oh, so it's actually Pete's down the street, and I was super surprised. I walked down the street, and I usually don't go to Pete's, but I went down, and I'm like, oh my God, they have some. And then that's actually where I bought my tunas too to make the colonche. So I bought it. I bought like, they were looking at me like I was crazy. I got like 30 of them because I was going to make the drink.
Yes.
Renata. Pete's in Little Village, so
Oh, yeah.
California and Cermak area.
Renata adds about the colonche. They add that it's fermented in clay vessels in Mexico, and that there's a feria, a festival in Mexico specifically dedicated to colonche, which is awesome.
Yes, yeah. So it's actually, and I should have mentioned, that's traditionally put in like clay pots. So something that we're going to try in that video, I didn't get the chance to show you. It's a really, really beautiful video because it shows them actually harvesting, right? Harvesting the fruit, and also the process that goes into it and how they do it. So on our next round that we're going to do, we're actually going to do the clay pot, and we're actually going to smoke it. So we're going to smoke the pot with some spices so it could kind of infuse the colonche as well.
Well, that's exciting.
I can share with you, Sara.
I would love that. I saw you posted on your Instagram a while back, and yeah, it was pretty exciting. Somebody asked if you need to add anything to start the fermentation process for that, or if it just kind of does it on its own.
It does it on its own. It's really amazing. Like, I can't say this enough about cactus. I just love everything about it, and just the fruit. It's just so awesome because the fermentation will really start within like 12 hours. Like, it starts really quick and really fast. So there is some like things that you need to keep in mind when you're making it, right? So like, you do need to like not touch it, like just leave it alone, let it do its thing. And it also, I found out the hard way, when you first fill the pot, whether you do the pots or like a container, you don't fill it up all the way. So if you fill it up all the way, because you're just going to release gases, it's going to overflow, and that's what happened. So what I did was I took off the top layer and then added it, and that was not a good idea because the second one that we poured into got contaminated. So did not drink that. I was not about to drink whatever was growing on there, but something different was growing on there. So you want to kind of fill it halfway. And all you do, it's optional, but you could boil it for 2 to 3 hours. Sometimes people boil it. I didn't boil it. So what we did was just pour it, put the seeds on top, and it kind of just let it do its thing. And then in 4 days, we went and strained it.
I would imagine you have to work with really clean jars to start that. Otherwise, you're going to
Yeah, so we've got mason jars that we have, and we just kind of filled them. And I just actually drank some more last night because we still we have one more container.
Let's look for some more questions here. Lots of comments singing your praises. Eileen asked, what books or resources would you recommend to someone who wants to learn more about native plants and their uses and cultural history?
Yeah, so I have that listed on with the research guide. I was going to send it to Sara before, but I'm a perfectionist and I wanted to put as much as possible in there for everyone. So I'm almost done, and I'm going to send it to her after this once I add a couple more things. And then yeah, feel free to look all that up, all the resources that I'm going to mention in there. They're going to have videos, books I recommend. And then also, yeah, once we're able to get back to the new normal at the Newberry, I invite anyone that's interested to come look me up. And I love giving tours, as Sara knows. Sara's joined one of the tours.
And I'll get everybody those resources either sometime today, latest tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah.
Somebody asked if the Newberry has a collection of indigenous recipes or cooking instructions.
We do. So we have, I know there's a couple teachers, and let me write that down for myself. I can put that in the actual guide, but there's someone that did a seminar focused on indigenous foods in the Midwest, and it was part of like I think a part of a project because for an exhibit that we had last year. So I can add that in there, the resources that pertain to like these areas.
Oh, we've got a lot of questions here. Let's see. Someone asks, what kind of squash is indigenous to this land? And they thought zucchini was Italian.
So there's a couple, let's see, I mentioned them over here. So hold on just a sec. So it's like I was looking up the scientific nerves, maybe you know this, Sarah, too, but the scientific term for it, it's called, here, I'll get it for you right now. Just a sec.
I'm also frantically Googling myself.
No, I have it like in my notes. I didn't mention it, but because I knew I was running out of time, but here it is. So for the squash, the specific one that's native to these areas is called, so it's called, I'm gonna type it in here. It's hard to, all these scientific terms. Cucurbita pepo. So like spaghetti squash, and this one here, this is the term for it. That one.
Okay, yeah. Cucurbita pepo, right? Looks like that's the native species. And then
there's like different ones under that zucchini is like part of too.
Right. Thank you for that. Somebody asked if you know where people can find indigenous seeds of indigenous varieties of plants.
There's a lot of, I don't know too much about actually seeds. I know like people like Chi Nations might be good to like ask, or maybe American Indian Center, stuff like that here locally. I have a lot of friends that, you know, just collect their seeds too. Yeah, but I don't know too much about where you can actually buy them, because the other thing is, you know, buying them from
Right.
Good sources, right? So.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of seed companies out there that sell cultivars, right, of a lot of plants that are indigenous to this area. But they're not the original, right? They're not the heirloom seeds. So yeah, coming across heirloom seeds can be sometimes difficult. There are companies out there, like I know that Seed Savers Exchange does have a collection of heirloom seeds. Trying to think of the big one that I think is farther south. If I remember, I'll add it in the follow-up email to everybody. But yeah, saving your own seeds and saving seeds from growers that you meet or know is always a good way to do that. Let's see. Somebody asked if there are any other groups outside of Chi Nations Youth Council, indigenous groups here that are doing any sort of growing that you might know of.
So I know there's a co-op. Is it called Caracollo? Is it that one?
Catatumbo?
Catatumbo, yeah. And I've purchased like vegetables from them just down the street too. And well, they're not down the street. They're plot of land where they grow. But I know, let's see, Chi Nations is the only one I work with or know. I know them. I know there's some other people locally probably doing some growing. I can't remember their name, but I can look up for you resources. I always tell people, as a librarian, I don't know everything, but I know how to find you everything, hopefully.
Yeah, and that's golden, you know, like research is precious. So I appreciate you and your resources. I
And we've
think,
got some recommendations over here in the comments that I'm seeing. Thank you. Thank you for that.
yeah, yeah, lots of comments here. Yep, Kim Triab is shouting out Soulfire Farm. They do a lot of work with the indigenous community in farming. Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, True Love Seeds. And then somebody also gave All My Relations podcast a shout out. They are a Native podcast that talks about Native food sovereignty. So if you want to know more about that, that's actually a great start.
Yes.
We're out of time. Thank you everybody for joining us. We super appreciate it. Thank you, Ana Lu, for being here with us. So you gave us so much good information today. And yeah, I look forward to the resource guide you're going to send us, and also the Newberry Library opening back up for us.
Yeah. Stay tuned on our social media. You can go follow them, Stock the Newberry all over the place.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next time.